Well, welcome to the first episode of SPCs Unleashed for 2024. We've done some processing on our retrospective at the end of last year. We've got a bit of a different format tonight, and we have Ali Haju taking us away. Over to you, Ali.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And in this show, we're going to look at, or at least we're going to get some insights in Nico's first experience in pair programming, figuring out how difficult it is, but also how useful it is. Then we will hear stories from Stefan, who revisit his lost art of behavior-driven development. And then eventually we'll also listen to the OG, and understand why built-in quality is probably one of the favorites of Mark. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the core competency, team and technical agility. The last one that we talked about was leading change. But in this episode, we're zooming in specifically into the dimension built-in quality. So I'm very curious about what your experiences are, and so that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. I'm gonna start with you, Nico. Your true passion, special moment, surprise, challenge in this dimension. Would you be able to share that with us?
Yeah, of course. Maybe let's start with shocking news. I'm an introvert. I really, when I was younger and developer, I really didn't like working too much with other people. I had my things in my mind, a perfect idea how to code, and the first time pair programming was really a life-changing moment because we were faster than on myself. So I expected something else. I expected to be slowed down, and I expected to explain too much. But in coding together, we achieved a better quality. We achieved a common standard how we develop, and it was at the end faster because we had a much better design than just coding it and somebody reviewing it, and then after months redesigning it. So it was really a cool experience to see. That's really also more productive at the end. And what we realized, all the sponsors, when they switched to more pair programming, that it wasn't just paying two people doing the same job. It was a much more better quality and much more knowledge spread around and more common guiding standard. Not having a book with guiding standard how you code. Now it was things you elaborated together. So it was really a huge experience the first time.
Alrighty, thank you, and I'm looking forward to hear a little bit more about that. So we're gonna give you the microphone for a longer period of time in a bit, just to deep dive more in your story. But thank you, Nico. How about you, Stefan? Would you be able to share your challenge, interesting experience, sort of a takeaway for this dimension?
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, my passion is for team sport, right? And in team sport, it's not only having the Messis and the Ronaldos and all those cool guys that score. It's about how does the team collaborate and how does it perform, right? And if you want performance, when it comes to quality, you need discipline. So discipline is something residing in my head all the time. And discipline, I just Googled it again, and I found it's rules of engagement so that we know how we collaborate, right? And it's a code of behavior, not only on the field, but also off the field, right? And if you look at soccer, if you look at rugby, in soccer, those guys, if they lose, sometimes they really behave like bad losers, right? In rugby, you admire the other team having won. Even in the stands, in rugby, the fans, they mingle, right? You see them in the same ranks and the same stands, cheering even to the opposite team if they had a good try. And I think quality has a lot to do with some foundations to then perform as a team and to deliver what should be delivered. So that's where my passion is.
Alrighty, thank you, thank you. Also diving into where it comes from, pulling parallels with sports. Very curious to hear some more details about your experiences in a bit. Thank you, Stefan. Then moving on to Mark. Mark, would you be able to share your true passion, special moment, surprise, or challenge in this dimension?
Look, my true passion was born the hard way. My first Agile project was back in 2000. I was doing a phased migration of a finance system using what we call the strangler pattern these days. And I looked at all the Agile stuff because I had to figure out how to do this thing phased. And I went, all of it makes sense to me except test automation. Can't see the value proposition in that. And I thought, I was a pretty good dev. And we had a good team. We collaborated really well. We used all the XP stuff except for test automation and continuous integration. Engaged with our users well. Went live with a new module every 3 months. Parallel run, gradually strangling the old system. And it was a beautiful application. Every 3 months, here's a new release, here's a new release. And then we noticed after the first 4 or 5 releases that every new release we spent more time testing we hadn't broken anything than adding new functionality. Until the final transition was another 3 months, of which we spent 2 weeks writing new functionality and 2.5 months retesting everything else. And it was just burnt into my psyche. If you don't take test automation, continuous integration seriously, there's no way you can sustain regular releases.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe that's just me, but that means what is happening in my head is I'm trying to calculate how long it would take, how many additional quarters it would take to just be busy with testing. If that increases every quarter, you just have more and more testing work to do. Eventually, that's the only thing that you would do.
Yep.
Thanks, Mark. Also over there, we're looking forward into diving more into your story. For me, the main purpose of building quality is, I don't know, I have some kind of a special love for Agile for hardware. Actually, just before this stream, with Stefan, we were talking a little bit about just this, the difficulties that arise whenever you're building physical products with Agile teams, with short iterations. There's a whole bunch of additional issues that pop up. Verification and validation takes way more time whenever you're designing physical products. You might need completely different engineering disciplines. So for me, built-in quality is sort of at the heart of what makes Agile useful for teams that are building physical products. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. However, I'm going to try to shut my face as much as possible during this episode because I want to hear from the experts and the specialists that I'm honored to be part of in this call. So thanks for being here. Today we're going to talk about the core competency team and technical agility, consisting of 3 dimensions: Agile teams, the team of Agile teams, and built-in quality. It's probably for most people, most SPCs, it's probably the first core competency that you'd be working on. Agile teams, of course, as an Agile coach, at heart, a team of Agile teams, you're trained, obviously. However, built-in quality, it seems to be sort of at the heart of what makes an Agile team really Agile. So we will talk about that. We'll talk about additional resources and conferences, books, and material that you'd be able to go through to become an SPC who is unleashed. So let's dive into how we're going to talk about this concept today. We will be doing things slightly differently compared to the previous episodes. So this episode is really focused on the stories of each other, experiences, and drawing parallels. We will have some more discussions going back and forth. And later on, we're trying to distill all of that goodness into just one thing, one takeaway for our audience. So we'll be talking about the meaning of built-in quality, and more specifically, built-in quality in practice, the challenges that you go through about in using built-in quality in practice. And I would like to ask you in a second to draw from your experience. So, share your story, how or what you did to improve, and to make built-in quality stick in your practices. And later on, we will summarize it using the just one thing metaphor. Starting with you, Nico. You shared with us that you're an introvert, or was sort of at heart, but simultaneously you are our story uncle. Share with us what happened and where did it come from?
Yeah, yeah. Being a storytelling uncle, as I always mention myself, it's really a role I can go in and feel comfortable. That's why I love storytelling. So when I go in this dimension more deeper and tell a story there, when I was a developer, the whole unit testing was just born, becoming new. So I was from the Java side, not from the .NET side or Microsoft side. They came later with unit testing, and I was always a UI guy. So I loved building UIs for customers, making their lives better when they work 24/7, or no, sorry, 8 hours a day with my software. That it just are faster and better. And in UI, there were not so much testing tools. Because you had a lot of false positives. So you had errors which weren't, and you had, it was really hell in doing unit testing with UI. But what helped me concerning quality was thinking more about how can I change my architecture to test some things with unit tests, and other things, you just have to test it by hand. But also realizing having cross-functional teams that the testing effort lands on my table. So before it was easy. I just wrote fantastic codes, no errors, no mistake, because I'm really gifted. I'm great as a developer, so I don't need testing myself. It's just for the others. You heard it a lot as coaches, yeah. And then when the software was finished, I just had to fill out an Excel sheet and say, oh, this and this scenario has to be tested. And then it went somehow somewhere else. And some other poor guy had just to do 1 day of UI testing. And then I'd come back, so, oh, one mistake. Oh, okay, let's do that. But with cross-functional teams, it changed. It was my job every Friday to take this Excel sheet and test it by hand. And this cross-functionality also changed something in the quality and the way I wrote software, because I don't like testing things by hand. So I really changed the architecture, how I wrote code to do much more unit testing. So this was the basic, the beginning, because being in a cross-functional team, being doing more things yourself, being responsible for end-to-end, changed really also the way how you produce a better quality, more testing, etc. So this whole movement of unit testing changed. Sorry, Ali, again.
Isn't this the case that, what was it again? Real men test in production.
Yes, the whole hero stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you realize, by the way?
Exactly. And so, okay, and
yeah.
I'm going to jump in for a second. Did you realize, Nico, that there are people who've done PhDs studying the difference between code produced through TDD and normal programming using static code analysis tools. And one of the things that they've found repeatedly is code produced using TDD is far more loosely coupled. Because coming through test-driven, actually, as you were just talking about, it forces you to take a different approach to your architecture and gives you much more maintainable code, test aside. So anyway, sorry I interrupted.
No, it's a cool thing to see. Yeah. And I think the change was really having these agile teams, you're being responsible end to end. And I also feel a pity if somebody else has to test your stuff. I felt more pity. So it wasn't somebody anonymous somewhere else. It was the team who had to test, and I really felt sorry that now we have to do a one-day work just because I thought I don't need this stuff. So it was really a changing moment. And the other stuff about changing was I'm coming from the UX part too. So I had a minor in working psychology or industrial psychology. So and the minor in my master was in this area. Um, so I had a lot of UX contact, and having the customer in the center was really or is still important for me. And what also changed for all of my teammates was how early we went testing with customers. So hallway testing is one tool I really love, because you have to go to the hallway, ask people you work with or you closely work with them what they think about the patterns you just have created. And for most people, it feels it's too early. I just have to finish some stuff. I can go out for feedback, and I think early feedback is so important, even for UIs, even for code you think it's not finished, because then if it was a creepy idea, you can just start over. And it's also a psychology thing. You have no problems to start over with the work you just started 2 hours ago. It's difficult to start over when you have to put in the trash 1 month's work. The sunk cost, ignoring sunk cost, it's so difficult for developers. When they go testing after 2 months, they will try to arguing why it's a cool idea. And if you test earlier, you just say, okay, yeah, people don't like it. Let's do a different approach. These were
Hallway
my two stories.
testing. I
Yeah.
like that. Hallway testing. There's so much to unpack over here because in the preparation, Stefan, you were also talking about your experiences in using test-driven development, behavior-driven development, and sort of finding your way, or let me rephrase, refinding your way of using built-in quality. Would you be able to share your story?
So yeah, I'd like to. Nico's intro into his story made me feel old. I started in
Oh,
1986 in a COBOL 85 environment, littered by encapsulated assembler stuff. So uh, I'm
Nice.
I'm on the way quite a while. And interestingly, when I started as a junior developer, we had some ingenious banking employees and clerks coming to us, teaching us how the banking industry really works. So we did some storytelling. We talked about scenarios, and at that time we didn't talk about behavior-driven development. It was these first attempts of rapid application development, right? So we said, okay, how can we change that? I see Mark nodding his head.
I got those
Uh,
battle scars.
and we said, okay, yeah. So we had the guys over from the front, from the operative value stream, and they told us how it works, right? And immediately we sketched scenarios on a whiteboard. And that was so beneficial that eased the analysis of the existing code, creating new code. So yeah, that was really cool. It was a good time. Then in my career, I transitioned into consulting, and I really, in a fast way, I lost this ability to talk to people, to listen to people, to talk about scenarios. I became a consultant. Okay, you do the usual stuff. You help people. And since I'm on the SPC journey, I rediscovered this really famous storytelling. Okay, let people tell their story, let people convey their context, and you're in. You're automatically in. And in some of the kind of programs who are working now with our customers, they came up and said, hey, we're it's hard to write features, it's hard to write epics, can we do some workshop?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we sketched some stuff, and during the workshop we had to align, we had to change how we do the workshop, because all of a sudden it clicked in my head and I said, okay guys, where do you start? What's your scenario? Okay. And we started sketching for 3 hours. And after 3 hours, guess what? We had the features. We even had some indication. Okay, that's more like an epic. How will we cluster that? How will we describe that? And at the end of those 3 to 4 hours, you couldn't distinguish who is a business person in the room, who is a tech guy, who is a nerd, who is a manager. We talked about the business, right? And recent experiences as well. We then kind of went into this. What is agile teaming? So if you have the traditional Scrum, we all know people, yeah, they tend to divert again instead of working together, have the one piece flow. Like that's the story. Let's work on it. No. Mark has a story. Ali has a story. Nico has a story. I have my story. End of the iteration. We show our stories, right? But that's not teaming. And some of the experience recently in a bank, we talked to ABAP developers, the hardcore guys regarding SAP, right? Who always tell us we can do this, we can't do that. Okay, that's our module, that's our environment. We can't contribute to any other area. That's not true. So after those workshops, we had ready-made stories. They fulfilled the acceptance criteria. And if you read others who do that really excessively, teaming, do the mob programming, pair programming, their code is at such a high quality, you hardly will have some bugs. Sometimes, yes, it happens, okay, but it's not this experience that we already heard from Nico, right? Or from Mark. The testing gets harder and harder. You get stomach pains. You know, there's user acceptance testing, and these guys will show up with a long list of to-dos. And I'm really excited about this. Yeah, what's a teaming aspect to deliver quality, not only in a functional way, but also in a non-functional way. And I'm
I
tempted
would like,
to do that much more. Let me quickly finish, Nico.
of course.
And like if you look at the Tesla approach, there's one is the driver, one is the navigator, the team is the team bringing input, and you then change your role like every 8 to 13 minutes. You as a newbie in the team, you become a driver. The people in the team help you to come on board very fast, right? And the different perspectives. I really like that. And I've seen some amazing results. Why don't we do it more? Why don't we increase quality and create built-in quality by a way how you behave, a way how you interact, how you collaborate? Nico, sorry.
Stefan, no, I have to say sorry. It resonates a lot of me, and I would like to highlight one important thing in my eyes. Quality isn't something you outsource to the IT department. So you see in Stefan's story, quality begins with workshops, with business people. It's not something yet the tech guys will. And why I do highlight this, because we see more and more SPCs coming not from the IT and think, yeah, quality, it's something I delegate, and it's not something you delegate, you be part of it. So thank you, Stefan, for the story.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned is expectation management. A demand, a request has some expectations behind it. If you know them, it influences your design, it influences the way you behave, you deliver, you validate, right? It's still a hypothesis until it's built. It's a hypothesis, it's an assumption. We think it should be better, it should help. But yeah, it's really cool stuff.
Nico, Mark, I think we've just been listening to the inventor of behavior-driven development before it was actually called behavior-driven development.
No, most definitely not. Look, I think there's a truth that we took TDD a long way. After my first experience, when I got so horribly burnt, I took test automation very seriously. I started to figure out continuous integration, and like I did nothing on anything until I had my CI rig and my test automation suite hooked up. I'd say we probably stretched it, and this is back in 2007, 2008. We stretched to the point where we were doing CI/CD. The CD part of it was burning CDs to put in envelopes, but so we went crazy, right? This is still back in my practitioner days, Scrum Master / tech lead, cutting a lot of code. And I was I couldn't imagine writing code without TDD and CI. I really couldn't. And then, of course, I encountered the enterprise. And the enterprise trying to do agile. And the first thing that hit me when I encountered the enterprise was most agile coaches didn't have a technical background. And in actual fact, agile, which began so much as a software developer, guru-driven movement, lost the software developers. It became, the big focus on collaboration and psychological safety, which is all great stuff, really important. But it didn't appeal to, Dev just wants to write sexy code. And as it ramped up in the industry and people went, I'll go be an agile coach, so many of them didn't come from a tech background, and they came in and they went, we'll teach you teamwork, we'll teach you collaboration, we'll teach you story writing. They couldn't teach tech skills. And so you had these vast numbers of engineers who went, test-driven development, test automation sounds hard, right? We've got testers for that. And so I really, luckily I was still technically competent back then. I could get in there and I could go hands-on with devs and take them down a TDD path, and I always saw great results. But I was an automation guy. And then I had the beginning of a real change in my built-in quality mindset when I went to a conference called Amplifying Your Effectiveness back in 2012. So it was the best conference I've ever been to. The conference, it wasn't an agile conference, it was a human systems conference. And the blend of people there, it was quite small, it was about 75, 80 people. And the blend was agile people, human systems people, and quality people. There were all these testing gurus, probably a third of the audience, because there were only 4 main speakers at this conference, and one of them was Jerry Weinberg. And Jerry Weinberg was the king of quality management. And you started to recognize the testers when they'd walk into a room because they always carried puzzles. None of these testing thought leaders were ever anywhere without a puzzle and an ability to mess with your head. And we went out to dinner one night, big group of us, and somebody was like, talk to me about testing and agile. And I went, that's easy, right? Full aggressive TDD, BDD, and then you don't need testers, right? You just automate it all. And this testing thought leader turned around and she put me in my place so hard. She's like, Mark, you're confusing testing with checking, right? And checking's the stuff you can automate. Testing's something very different. It's asking questions of the system. And of course, if you could script it as a test case, as a series of steps, you could automate it. But all the high value that comes from testers is the way that they think about things, the perspectives and the angles they come from, and the questions they ask of the system. And, of course, all these testing gurus are there because they all view Jerry Weinberg as their mentor. And Jerry has this definition. He says, quality is value to someone. And very contextual, right? Because different people have a different definition of quality. And what is value? What do people care about? And so I started to go, well, actually, shift left is shift the quality thinking left. Right? How do you start to ask those different questions early? And there's a whole movement on it. It's called the context-driven testing movement, who really have a very non-mechanical approach. And they all come from this perspective that says there's testing and there's checking, and testing is what's valuable, and checking is what you automate. And most of them love to tweet and talk about things and go, tell me the automated test that would ever find this. So I followed them for a couple of years, and that helped me a lot at the strategic level because when you're talking big enterprise systems, you've got SAP ABAP involved, you've got COBOL involved. Like classic TDD BDD is hard. Asking interesting testing questions, Ellie, is much easier. When you take your strategic test people who know what happens when, 10 big applications that are glued together change and they know what to think about, and you get them involved early in life, amazing stuff happens. So I started to be very much more about, yeah, of course we've got to do TDD, BDD, like test automation, but we've got to get people involved, the testing mindset involved earlier. And then that took me very heavily down the BDD path. And BDD more from, I think of BDD as a requirements gathering technique, right? What comes out the other side of it is tests, but the structure of BDD triggers a series of conversations. And those conversations often give you quality as value in the eyes of someone. In fact, as Stefan's talk about workshops. So I started really work with BDD because I had all these clients in the enterprise who are like, test automation is way too hard for us. It's a ways away. We can't begin with that yet. And here's all the reasons why. I was like, let's go shift left. Let's do BDD. Doesn't even matter if we don't automate them. I guess it's amazing when you get to automate them. It doesn't matter if you're not automating. Let's do BDD just to improve the quality of our understanding and shift that testing mindset left. Did that for a little while, read a bunch of books on it. Goiko Adzik wrote all the best books on it. And then I had the chance to go on a course with Goiko. And I went because I wanted to learn how he facilitated. Right? It's facilitating a good BDD session is an art form. And I thought I was a master of BDD. And I just went, I'm going to go and learn a bit about facilitating. And then I spent 2 days going, I was so not a master of BDD. And what he taught me just amped it up. So it's probably the single biggest thing that I've found ever since, and that was maybe back in 2014, is if you want to shift built-in quality, it doesn't matter whether you're building hardware or software or business solutions with no technology. If you get BDD rolling, it will accelerate your built-in quality journey, automation or not.
May I pick up on that one, Mark? And I love listening to your story, right? BDD and from my early days, it's, as you said, it's not only gathering and collecting demand or requests, it's exploring through this conversation, through diving into the scenarios, what is relevant. And you brought it up again, the context is king, right? If you don't know what the context is, you probably have the wrong stuff in your backlogs. Crap in, crap out. You can be as agile as you like. It doesn't create the outcome and the impact, right? And you mentioned it, Ali. It's probably the most important dimension in all those core competencies. We probably hit rock bottom if you create stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Nico.
No,
All yours.
I talk too much, so you can too. But what I want to say is exactly what it makes important is not only the tools we are having, the mechanics. It's really about the meaning, about the business, about the people, and that's sometimes a misunderstanding. It's they just think the people, yeah, it's test automation and finished, and we have this already. The tech guys are doing it, so it's really something with the people. It's discussion, it's understanding. So there's a lot in it. That's why I also think it's one of the most important one. Ali, now I want to hear your voice.
So, thanks. But so, just listening to the stories from all three of you, maybe it's me, but it feels like built-in quality. Your experience with built-in quality, it originates in confrontation, mistakes, issues. Sort of, you had a way of working. You tried to do your best, but it wasn't there. It something was missing. And out of that, you figured out, oh, we need to find a different approach for connecting with the business, writing out our ideas on how to test our work eventually before actually building our stuff, finding ways to get feedback way quicker. The CI, not CD yet, approach of Mark, trying to find ways to share ideas while developing the sort of pair programming approach of Nico, and finding out ways to, let's say, install agility without actually calling it agile by including people from all over to talk about scenarios, sort of pre-use case discussions, what Stefan has mentioned. So Mark talked about the work of Goiko, that he was extremely inspired in, and that the material that you've followed throughout your career. Nico, did you have any sort of books, conferences, material that you jumped into in order to sort of educate yourself in the use of built-in quality in your practices, your day-to-day work? Did you use something, or did you find something that was sort of extra useful for you?
Yeah, so in these days, when I was younger, I didn't read so much books. I just tried to Google stuff or search. Google wasn't there. It was something else. It was just searching the internet. It was not Googling those times. Um, uh, so I really started reading more about XP. So XP also was for me the next changing moment next to Scrum. The whole quality thing with me came with extreme programming, XP. The other stuff, what I did was a lot of usability things, because these times, so in my minor, we were 180 students, and only 4 of them choose this minor. So it was some kind of exotic. That's why I focused on things that are not too close to the IT, because the other stuff, the whole automation stuff was there by my colleagues. So what I started doing is next to the XP resources, notebooks, just searching in the internet for it, reading papers, going to conferences. This was still the same, but I don't remember how this conference were named. They just existed. Meetups also had different names then, those times, black and white. No, black and white is Stefan. I had color television in my childhood. No. So
That's how I
the books
started on TV, black and white.
with newspapers. No. So when I go to the books, and these times I read much more German books, and one of those I can recommend was one I reviewed. It's a really thin one. European books are really small, around 150 pages. Was about usability. And now I've seen the 4th version of it exists also in English. I hope it's the same. Title looks like this one. Was user-centered engineering, user-centered design. This whole dialogues you have, this go out and see, watch how people are working. It's these things I tried to bring in my teams, because it wasn't so common those days. I think today, as a developer or as somebody caring for quality, you need the IT stuff. You need extreme programming, pair programming, or pair working, even mob programming now. We heard from Stefan the Tesla examples. They're doing a lot of mob AIs. So it's just the next step. And in my case, it's really important to have all this usability know-how, this UX know-how that also helps with quality. And to connect to your sentence, why it's important this way, I think the whole scaling thing is a game changer. Before, when I had just one stakeholder and I was the only developer, it was so easy. Or if I was a stakeholder and the developer, it was much more easier to write just a little homepage, a little mobile phone application or whatever. It's much more easier. But when you are 50 people, 100 people, then you need more, and that's why it changed. So our world changed. We need more people. We have much more complicated stuff to do. So we need new approaches. That's why it changed. Just to connect to the last words you said before.
Thank you, Nico.
Just,
Thank you, Nico. And how about you, Stefan? What was Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to jump, just because mob programming's come up a couple of times. It didn't make my just
Yep.
one thing list, but if you ever get the chance, go to a mob programming conference. They happen once a year in Boston. It's a bunch of the old XP guys. It's Woody Zool who organises them. And they are amazing conferences. I went to the first three of them, haven't been back since COVID. But if you like, so much of doing this stuff is about learning to facilitate it, right? As an SPC, how do you help people engage with it and start to build good habits around collaborative exploration, whether it's BDD or TDD or anything else? Mob programming is amazing, and different techniques for achieving it well. Mob programming conference, brilliant stuff. Sorry, I had to get that out. I had so much fun.
No, excellent. Thanks for sharing. Stefan, so in full Technicolor, what was sort of what were your tools, sources, and points of inspiration that brought you sort of into the realm of built-in quality, test-driven development, behavior-driven development? What did you use to enrich yourself?
Yeah, guess what? It's common sense. I sometimes ask myself, or when I'm new in a context, I try to map people. What do you do in your private life? Why don't you do it if it's successful in your professional life? Why do we change our behavior immediately when we go to work, like doing copy paste? We're looking for structural elements in Kanban, Safe, and Scrum, whatever, to solve the problem, right? And for me, when it comes to built-in quality, again, it comes back to a lot of common sense. Okay, well, what's the job to be done? And immediately you have to discuss that because you don't know everything. So get the collaboration going. And as Mark said, probably the most important thing for me as a coach is, how do I facilitate? How do I become a catalyst? So they start talking, they start collaborating. And then it's more like observing and helping them to keep the flow up, whatever it is. Is it more technical stuff? Is it going towards CI, as Mark said? Is it using tools or detecting, okay, something is missing? Okay, what's the blind spot? What's the white space? How can we fill it? And people are smart enough. Why don't we engage our brain cells when it comes to professional life? And why, and probably, yeah, again, if you want to play rugby, it's a team sport. It's not Richie McCaw or one of these heroes running around on the field alone. No, it's 14 other people working together, right? And yeah, some stuff is really good. Like, again, the BDD stuff. At the moment, I'm sensitive to wherever BDD pops up. Okay, what are the flavors? You mentioned Woody Sill, like the teaming aspect, right? He's one of these guys who brought that up. Good book. Um, yeah, that's where I say, okay, let's do that, and perhaps a little bit back to what I said. What's my passion? Okay, discipline has to do with, you know what you do. And if we remember the Shu-Ha-Ri, okay, you go to the dojo the first time, you don't tell the black belt how it's done. You listen carefully and then you start repeating. And in sports, we know, unless you have done this practice at least a few thousand, 10,000 times, you're still a novice, right? And then you start exploring how it gets better. And we should probably consider that as well as a coach. You have different maturity levels in a team. How do you bring them together? And the teaming aspect, the collaboration aspect, the working on scenarios helps to get into, okay, now I got my 10,000 times done that, and now I'm probably going further and I'm leveling up.
Nice. Thank you, Stefan. So that your practice makes perfect, essentially. practice makes perfect. Is that your just one thing, sort of your takeaway? I mean, if you would have to summarize your experience, your, let's say, the tools that you use, the sources of, for inspiration that you've been through, I'm going to stay with you, Stefan. Is that your sort of one main takeaway for using built-in quality in, let's say, the right way, using it into your practices?
Let me probably rephrase. Quality is not negotiable because quality is a standard. It's something you want to achieve. You need to know what it is. So study the standard, study the regulation, study the achieved goal or the target to achieve, and then find out how do you get there, right? And then you probably follow this. Quality is not negotiable. Everything follows, and it's a team sport.
Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Mark? If you just had one thing, one takeaway for built-in quality, do you agree that to whatever Stefan just mentioned, that quality is not negotiable? Is that the one takeaway, or do you have another one?
Look, I think I'd go a slightly different path. Because quality is not negotiable, given that so many people have different interpretations of what quality is an interesting question. I think my argument would be, enterprise agility is about acceleration. Right? When you go down the enterprise agility journey, you don't go from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. What you want to build is gradual and sustained acceleration. And there's a lot of things you do when you kick stuff off that give you a huge burst of energy. And whether it's the training or the inspiration and motivation events, or the special exceptions that are made for the early experiments, right? You get to start moving with a burst of speed. You'll never keep it up, even that initial speed, if you don't tackle built-in quality, and you certainly won't sustain acceleration beyond that initial speed unless you get there, right? So if you're working at the team or the train level as an SPC and you're going, what's probably the one biggest lever that I've got in terms of improving that acceleration? It's built-in quality. It's more than just automation. Yes, automation is important, both software and hardware, but there's so much more in that mindset. And so we've all said it's critical, but if I added one thing, it's if you want to help generate change in an area, learn to speak their language. Right? It's invaluable because you're going to have to lean into enterprise quality control departments. Right? You're going to have to challenge things. And they've got to feel like you understand their world. You've got to know their language. You've got to be able to speak to them based on the concerns they've got, because they'll all say quality is not negotiable. My version of quality that I've done for the last X number of years. Go study. And maybe study the context-driven testing movement, because boy, you'll get a lot of their language, and you'll probably be able to reference some people they haven't heard about that speak as a professional and thought leader in the quality space, and will be much more impactful than you.
Excellent,
Great.
excellent. Thank you for that, Nico.
I had a lot of fireworks in my head now, a lot of synapses going on. Ali, your book tips, because you also have prepared, I think, some stuff. What do you would recommend as books, as conferences, etc.?
Good one. I've spent a huge amount of time preparing, of course. No, when I thought about just a single book, or at least one thing, one topic, I thought, let's look at, let's say, outside of the realm of traditional software development, or outside of the realm of agile documentation, literature, and blogs. Something that I've used in the past that sort of blew my mind away and I think really helps in here is the study of approaches to build very sensitive, very complex systems. And one of the books that I got introduced to was NASA's Systems Engineering Handbook. It's a free to download document, which is published by NASA, the space agency. They had, I think the most recent version is version 2, which can be downloaded as a PDF, but it talks about building huge complex systems with people from all over the world, with the endless amount of suppliers that are involved. And I mean, if you would go through the first, I think it's 16 pages, first 16 pages explains the model and explains the approach and the way of thinking. They really zoom into the constant need of feedback, the constant need of, in a way, testing assumptions. That is from writing contracts to designing components to integrating different kind of commercial off-the-shelf available parts with the stuff that you built yourself. The baseline there is just, it's fantastic that you know it all. However, let's figure out whether that's true. Just test it out. Test it out. And it's so at the basis of the way of thinking in building rockets. This material, this information has been around forever. Building rockets since the 50s. And this is, these kind of ways of working has been developed by very brilliant people, very brilliant engineers that had, their hands drenched in oil and all kind of chemicals because that's what they were doing. They were building the Concorde aircraft. They were building the space shuttle and the Apollo rockets that went to the moon. So there is a lot of goodness out there, distilled really nicely in the NASA Systems Engineering Handbook. So that would be sort of my one thing.
There's some really good examples on that in the new Gene Kim and Stephen Spear book. And the name of it's escaping me at the moment, but they go back to a lot of really interesting examples from, the development of the rockets, the shuttles, just to paint a little bit more flavour to it. So it looks like you're nodding like you've read it, Ali.
Rewiring the something organization.
Yeah, rewiring the winning organisation.
That's it. Yeah. Good book. And from Gene Kim, he's a fantastic author. How about you, Nico? You're just one thing.
Just one thing. So it's so easy to build a tiny hut on a crappy ground, but you don't build skyscraper on a crappy ground. So whenever you go towards skyscraping, you need this core competency. Before you can just fake it, you can make spaghetti code and write a thin mobile app, and nobody will realize. But don't write spaghetti code if you do a skyscraper. And I think this is what I would like to say as only one thing. And during the firework sessions I just had in my head, I realized something. So now I have 3 more things to say. Sorry, if I may. You're the moderator. You can say no. Okay. One thing was what Stefan said. It's really about bring people together. I think it was Stefan and Mark. Bring people together. So as an SPC coming from the tech part, your job is not teaching. Your job is enabling. And if you're an SPC coming from the non-technical part, you're not the one who delegates stuff. It's really an important core competency. So this was what happened during listening to you. So new aha moments to say, okay, this is something very, very important to point on. And yeah, my one message is you need this core competency. Otherwise, your skyscraper will just become the Tower of Pisa or something like that.
Nice. Okay, wait a second. So we have Dean with you cannot scale crappy code. And then we have Nico with you can build a hut on rotten ground, but not a skyscraper. I'm leaning to you, Nico.
Especially with your Swiss pronunciation of skyscraper.
Exactly. And that would be nice for us to rewatch in the stream, in the recorded stream.
Crap,
That's the beauty of
of
exactly
language.
the beauty of
Beauty of
recordings.
language. Yeah.
So the thing is, sort of, to round off, we've talked about a lot of approaches, experiences that built-in quality was it became a necessity for actually all of us, all three of you. It became a necessity. You figured out that there was something missing, and you need to invent or find an approach to build better things or build things better. So in Safe's Measure and Grow, let's say tools, there is an additional way of measuring the core competency, and more specifically also the dimension in there. So within the context of built-in quality, what would be a leading indicator, sort of an early indicator for you to be able to understand, to see whether a team or an environment, a business, an art is actually growing in its built-in quality competence, if I can call it like that? So we've done some preparation, because the Measure and Grow way of assessing has a couple of questions essentially that you could grade, you can answer, and we've seen that both Stefan, Mark, and Ali, that's me, we've all identified the team's ability or the team's practices to catch defects early as their sort of as our preferred way of the sort of the one leading indicator, except for you, Nico. You thought something else. You thought you had a different sort of leading indicator, something that you would like to zoom into, to identify a team's competence for built-in quality. Nico, would you be able to sort of highlight or explain why you chose a different way of measurement?
Yeah, I first thought the really important thing must be in the upper one, in the quality practices, and not in the customer satisfaction. But at the end, for me, is the whole feedback, the whole talking, the whole understanding much more important. So when I look from the outside and people don't care about the customer or don't care for feedback, and they're just sitting and in their cave and programming, that's for me something like it's something I can see it from outside much more easier. Or saying, oh, our customer doesn't need continuous integration. He only wants once a year a release. So why do the whole stuff? So why do a continuous integration when the customer doesn't want to see it? Have you ever asked your pilot customers if it's really right? Maybe some pilot customers want to give you feedback. So that's why for me it's an indicator I can see very fast, or maybe with my background I can see faster. So if they don't seeking for feedback, for customer interaction, I really doubt if they are doing a good quality. At the end, you can build a perfect product, but for the wrong market. So then it doesn't help.
May I jump in?
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, please,
And
Stefan.
admit, Ali, my sticky at the beginning of the preparation was somewhere else, because I went back to what's kind of the goal of this core competency and the dimension. And if you go back, it reads to deliver solutions that reliably meet customer needs. And then the other sentence is essential to reach a state of business agility. And my first attempt was, my sticky was up here. Our team prevents problems from reoccurring by addressing the root cause. Then I thought, that's reactive. Why not being smarter? And that's when I moved my sticky to our team's testing practices catch defects early. And that's more consistent to what my story is, my background, going back to the early days, right? listening carefully, and then be proactive. And Mark explained it, and probably can restate on that. This shifting left not only practices, even asking the right questions at an early stage is probably the biggest lever you have to then deliver reliable solutions.
Thank you, Stefan. And how about you, Mark? Finally, why did you choose for the team's testing practices, which can catch defects early, as your preferred way, maybe preferred leading indicator for figuring out whether there's built-in quality competence?
Look, I think when I looked at the measure and grow and said, if you just had one to focus on, where do you begin? Right? Because I could look at all of those and go, yeah, they're all important. Certainly preventing problems from recurring by addressing the root cause, right? Huge. But you've got to begin by finding the problems. And oftentimes you've got to make the space and time to do the other things. And, if you can, and again, coming back to the shift left concept, right? Finding a defect early, a defect can be your understanding of the intent that you find during BDD. Right? A defect can be it doesn't work the way the customer expected. But building that habit of actually we're going to work in a way that allows us to chase a defect quickly. Everything else kind of flows from that. And I'll probably I'll throw in one closing comment on that one, and it's a software related one, but you can take it anywhere. We had a team at a government organisation, and they were building COBOL backend on a mainframe against a web front end, and a very prolonged life cycle. And it really wasn't working as a team, it was working as a group of individuals and specializations. And we went through this thing to go, hey, if we put them in a team room, can we see a change happen because we managed to get a team room? Because that was certainly back when I was an agile practitioner, we always had a team room. And we backed our computers up and crowded ourselves in because it was a great place to work. So we went through getting a meeting room refitted, getting extra Wi-Fi and power plugged in there so we could move this team in as a team room. And they threatened industrial action because we were violating their right to a certain number of inches of desk space and so on and so forth. So it was quite a protracted effort to get them to move in. And basically we had to keep desks on the floor for them so that they could escape the team room if they needed to. But they got in there, and 6 weeks later, they were resisting the idea that they'd ever be asked to move out. And one of the things they talked about is one of the new protocols they had. And the new protocol was that if the tester found a defect, they weren't yet doing test automation, if the tester found a defect and the dev could fix it faster than the tester could raise a defect request, they didn't raise a defect request. Right? And they were fixing defects in 5 minutes. Friendly competition. Right? Tester's like, I just found something. Dev's like, show me. Fix it, turn it around. And that whole team's acceleration changed so much because they got into this early and informal feedback process. And all kinds of just ridiculously good things came out the back of it. So find your stuff early.
Big grin on my face, Mark. We always tell them and say this competition, we write the ticket before the customer brings the ticket into the system. And that's the attitude, right?
Yeah.
We fix it before they even can say, hey guys, it doesn't work. Great stuff.
Nice. Thank you. Built-in quality is sort of trying to build in your engineers in a room, and magic happens. So thanks for sharing your stories, gents. We've been through test-driven development, behavior-driven development, context-driven development. We've been through the stories of trying to interface very quickly with your colleagues, with pair programming. We talked about just getting smart people together in the same room. With the story from Mark just now, we talked about the ability to understand each other better and getting business or pulling business to you and talking scenarios with the story of Stefan. So there's a lot to uncover, and how to build your knowledge and therefore your competence as an SPC within this dimension, within the dimension of built-in quality. We have a public Miro, Mark, right? That will contain all of the sources that we've talked about, the websites, the books, the conferences, any additional references for you to dive into, which is, I think, our way of saying there's no excuse to unleash yourself as an SPC. So visit the Miro and build your competence. Mark, I think the outro would be all yours.
I'm going to do the outro simply to say we will be retrospecting as we have at the end of every one of the SPCs Unleashed. And we're going to keep streaming, but we'll chop it when we do the polished cut of it later. So I'm going to take us over into a quick retro moment, and I'm going to actually turn screen share on for the second time tonight. Let's do a very quick 2-minute reflection on this new format and how we felt about it. So I'll just whack a quick timer up.
Yes.
All right, it's time.
And time's up.
Let us have a chat. We'll start with the positive. It's always nice to start on a high. Format works, laughter, fun, shift in energy, personal stories and experiences. Certainly felt a lot less mechanical. I felt energized much faster than last time.
Because of storytelling.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you get a flashback or you listen to another story
just...
and then 10 stories like it pop in your head. Yeah.
Yep.
Go figure, stories are a powerful way of
and you
communicating.
can tell way better about a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's much there's some depth to a story compared to sharing something that might feel like a theoretical some guidance, some sort of a guidance pronounced and mentioned as a teacher.
Yeah. So looking at do more stories, more stories from the moderator, more experiences and debate, building up on each other's stories. I'm actually going to cluster a couple of these elsewhere. I'm going to put that one over here.
Mhm.
So tell me about emerging thread.
Comes from me. Probably the challenge as moderator is if there is a thread emerging, how do we follow it without jeopardizing the structure that the moderator has built on his moderation? Both ways for me are good. Sometimes you have to deviate a little bit because it's really interesting for the people. How to come back? That's probably more into then start doing. How do we probably then have the feedback loop also back to our format? It's still very static. How can we become into a more fluid format as well?
I'm actually going to cluster more stories from moderator over there too. As I think all of that stuff goes together.
Yeah.
I
I
agree.
want to chat briefly about finding a balance of perspectives. So when I prepped, I went, what am I going to talk about, right? Because to be honest, the best thing in Safe 6 in the competency was them introducing all those domain-based built-in quality practices. And that morph away from Safe going, here's the 8 XP practices we like, into we're going to give an inclusive interpretation of built-in quality. And when I did my first scan of where you're all going, I went, cool, Ali's interested in the hardware side. Stefan didn't look too software centric, so I'll feel okay about just being software hat on for this one. And then it felt like we all just talked about software. And we didn't have somebody's voice coming in from a non-software angle. So I wonder whether there's a piece for us in picking stories to tell or threads to share, of actually kind of being deliberate about going, are there multiple viewpoints to cover? And I think Ali was going to go heavy hardware, but of course he devoiced himself as the moderator. How do we make sure that we don't get trapped in a very narrow interpretation?
Yeah, and what I did notice, however, I mean, I agree with what you mentioned, Mark, but what I did notice is that we talked a lot about actually quite generalizable processes. The pair programming approach, applicable everywhere. Behavior-driven development, very universally applicable. So initially I had the same feeling that there was like, ooh, it might be a lot of software stories that are going to be shared, but the stories actually contain practices that are actually very, very generally applicable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand your observation.
Based on Mark's statement,
Go, Stefan.
Sorry, Mark.
No,
Go,
no, you
go
go.
ahead.
You
Go ahead, Mark.
You go.
Based on Mark's statement, yeah, maybe including guests to kind of break this ring-fenced perspective from the preparation. If we see that, couldn't we occasionally bring someone in who is in German or in Latin it's the advocatus diaboli, the one person who thinks the opposite way, who brings in a total new perspective to spice it up, although we are not leaving the frame or the topic, right?
I think that'd be
tickles us.
I think it's be great. Maybe once we've just stabilised in the new format.
So there's two ways. Either a guest or someone of us takes a very controversial perspective to what the stories bubble up, to what also the debate when it comes to measure and grow, right? Not the moderator, but someone who says, okay, Mark, why is this the lever? Really? Okay, good. Let's move on.
I wonder whether, because I think for me that was two things. There was a bit that said bring in a guest who's going to come from a fresh perspective, and then there was let's have a chaos monkey.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
And
Sure.
and
You're
I
right.
think for me, the protocol says the moderator has the innate permission to jiggle.
Yep.
To challenge, to poke, to prod, because that way you've got somebody who's thinking about the whole session anyway in the balance and looking at the stories as they emerge, and you've got an opportunity as the moderator during the preparation to go, hey, this is all looking very one-dimensional. Yock, given we're talking about a dimension, or to challenge the moment, or perhaps be a little bit more explicit in highlighting the threads that Ali pointed out about the fact that we'd actually, although we started talking about software, we went to very generalized things. So
Yeah, so that's it. If I may, there's this. I think what we are searching for is indeed a sort of a general thread through the stories, and in preparation would require to first identify the thread and then to build our stories around that, which we haven't done now. It was, we have a topic, and we dive into our experiences, and those becomes, we shared those. But if we would have defined a story better, I think as in our templates, I think in point 5, the so-called moderators context triggers, guidance for discussion, I think in there, if I'd be what I haven't done though is write out a certain type of a thread, sort of the types of stories, types of topics, the types of how should I call it? Is it the overall general storyline of this episode written out in certain topics or certain chapters, and then we'll define or develop our stories around that would generate stories that would flow much more into each other rather than having 3 separate stories.
There's 2 ways of that, and that was the idea, and we have to discuss it. That frame number 5. Either the moderator comes up with a general idea of a storyline, and we add our stories that add to the storyline, or we start, if someone is earlier, starts with a story, and the story might trigger some storyline or some even. The idea behind is some snippets. Could we go this way or the right way? So you have like signposts in there. There's 2 ways, and I would leave it open to the moderator, because some moderators might have an idea, and in some topics I would happily be the moderator but have no clue at the beginning how to start with, and I will base it on the stories. That would be probably my approach as a moderator.
Yeah. I understand that.
I think for me, so I personally, I use the word facilitator rather than moderator as my mental framing for this. I join you guys in the moderator choice. I'm assuming that's the European flavour.
can change it, Mark. That's if it's
No,
more
I,
tangible, let's do it. Come on.
I'm the minority Aussie here, so I'm happy to just work with the majority language.
Hey, we're not talking about minorities and majorities. It's come on.
But if I think about the facilitation, and this maybe starts to play in a little bit to the voice of the moderator. As a facilitator, when you facilitate a workshop, part of what you're trying to do is to hear the different voices in the room and help them to create a narrative in the moment and to catch an emphasis that you've heard somewhere else and then just point out the fact that it's connected to. So you can actually, and I'll always do this when I'm facilitating, is like, I'll see the thread as it emerges in the moment. But then in my prep for facilitation, I'll make sure that I've generated some divergent pieces that are going to be interesting in how they come together.
Yep.
So I wouldn't want to pre-can the story thread too much, because I would want to say, hey, if the facilitator devoices, right, and says, look, I'm not going to add too much in terms of my own storytelling because I'm in facilitation mode. But then you go in facilitation mode, I might tell a snippet of a story that helps me to join 3 other stories that I've heard. And I'll be that kind of connecting voice. To me, that's going to feel much more natural. Because we all got what we had. We had fun and energy. We started telling stories.
Yeah.
And what we weren't good at was figuring out how to talk to each other in the middle of the story.
Yeah.
And make space
way
rather
to
than charging to
interject.
the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
That will mean
Yeah, with-
section 5 will be deleted. We keep kind of the 4 facilitators context overview as an entrance point to the discussion. But let's get rid of number 5.
Look, I actually
Stories
found
as a base.
I found 5 was a really useful set of mental triggers for me.
Okay.
I looked at 5 and I went, what does it mean? Why is it hard? What's a story of my own? How did I improve personally? And what's involved in making it stick? And I went, actually, that's kind of the story I'm going to tell. I'm going to make sure I hit those points, not necessarily in that order. And I'm going to save the single takeaway. That was my interpretation. I actually thought the section 5 was a really good trigger.
Okay.
Just not planning for it to be exactly in that order.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's keep the freedom, right? Yeah.
So if you think about protocols.
All right. And if we then...
Sorry, go.
Yeah.
Go, Ali.
Yep.
No. I had exactly the same question. I would phrase it slightly differently. So protocols, what would be an approach for the next time?
So as I was watching it, because I could see Nico's face when he wanted to talk. And Stefan obviously couldn't or just wanted to keep talking.
Yeah.
And like there's the easy protocol, which is if everybody uses push to talk, is you turn on your push to talk button, you see somebody's green ring and you go, I'm going to find a moment of breath and throw to them. I'm on voice activated. I can easily turn push to talk on. But that's the lightest weight signal in Discord is you just turn on push to talk. It's like, I've got something to say. And if you're the one speaking, you've just got to be watching others' green rings because it's much easier. I don't think we want to put that all back on the head of the facilitator. I think for me, if we've all got that, you can go, I'm telling a story and I can see Nico's push to talk button. I go, Nico, what's on your mind? And maybe I finish the sentence and...
So now it should be green, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Even if
Yep.
I'm not talking. Okay.
That's correct.
I'm actually not on push to talk. I have to change.
I know this from my marriage. I have to push my wife so I'm able to talk. No. push aside and talk.
That's the Greek way.
That's cool when you have so many cultures in you. You can just use the one that benefits you at the moment.
This is Sparta. No, how and something that we need to. So what I did notice, however, is that the last part of our talk, so the just one thing and the measure and grow part, that took more than 15 minutes. I did take a. I think we were actually quite well in terms of timing. But the last part took a little bit more time than that I've anticipated. I thought would be 15 minutes and that's it. But we actually went overboard for about 5 minutes, so that was a 20-minute section. And I think the next time for that last part, we need a little bit more. We need to reserve a little bit more time. I think it was interesting to, or would have been nicer probably, to hear each other's reasoning why you chose one of the leading indicators, how I called it, and to maybe put two of you against each other. That would have been nice. As in, why did you choose this? But that's different from compared to you. And wait a second, that's, I mean, you're talking about the same thing, but why did you choose something different? I think that there's some interesting, and there probably especially at the end of the show, there will be some energy in that. So I think next time I would have spent a little bit more time on 6 and 7.
So I felt like
Agreed, Ali. We should
Sorry, Tom.
we should have that time. Sorry, Mark. And we probably can trim some of the time. We agreed not to kind of book reference. We have it on there. At the end, we say, okay, here are the books. You might occasionally use a reference when you are talking in your story, but I wouldn't go into this overview. And we had probably the temptations from the last episodes just to do it, but I will keep it out if possible.
Yeah, if it comes up, if it comes up
good
naturally,
because
In my case, I was just curious about the NASA handbook, so it didn't fit for me just having there something from NASA. That's why I really wanted to know more. That's why I asked in the back channel, can I ask you? Yeah. And now I have downloaded it already in the background.
very good.
Now I just have to read it.
I'm going to suggest that we just go for a 30-second rule on the just one thing. 30 seconds each. Because I think what happened when we got to just one each, we all kind of went back into soapbox mode.
Well, reasoning mode, as in, this is my one thing because, and then there was a story that came out.
But if you set a rule for yourself,
when I'm a facilitator, so when I'm a facilitator in workshop with clients, I use this trick, just one sentence or just one word. So after a one-day workshop, so if you would describe the whole episode or the whole workshop in one word, what would it be? And the nice thing in German is you can use the hypothesis. You can have kindergarten teacher, apprentice, workshop maker. So still one word, but that's one thing I like to restrict people, because when you finish with a workshop with how was the day for you, then you never ended up, because everybody want to tops the other. It's a human being not listening, just talking at the end. That's why I like to say, if you only have one sentence, what would it be? Could be something we not have to say it, but we can try ourselves, put us in the mood. It's just one sentence, maybe with 1 or 2 semicolons, but one sentence.
how about we just rename just one thing to just one sentence?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Done.
Done.
Then it'll force.
Exactly.
Then it'll really force us to wordsmith our sentence. Yeah.
And the one thing.
Let me prepare it. I can put it in one page.
That allows us to talk more in depth about the reasoning and the context why we choose this particular part of measure and grow. in that area. Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Easy tweaks for next week.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to take us off the air. And that concludes the retrospective
Alrighty.
for the first episode of 2024. And we'll be back next week for... What will we be back for? Next week, we'll be back to talk about relentless improvement. So we are off the air.
Which is what we